Welcome back to the first annual Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers NBA season preview. I am your host, Brandon Silvers. So I've split this preview up into 3 separate parts for your convenience. In part 1, we covered the championship contenders. These were the teams that I determined have an actual non-zero chance to win the NBA championship this year. I broke down why they were contenders, what could get in the way of them winning the championship, and how I think their season's going to go. So in this part, we're going to cover the playoff contenders. These are the teams who I believe will compete for a playoff spot, but they have no shot at winning an NBA title. I'll cover why they're going to make the playoffs, why they aren't quite good enough to be title contenders, and what to expect from them this season. In part 3, I'm going to take a look at the teams competing for the number 1 pick. These are the teams who have no chance of making the playoffs because they're just flat out terrible. I'll break down exactly why they're terrible, if there's any reason at all to have hope for them moving forward, and what to expect from them this season. So let's go ahead and get started on the playoff contenders by taking a look at my Los Angeles Lakers. Okay, so the Lakers were 33-49 last season. It was truly awful. As a Lakers fan, I hated every second of it. But they will be a playoff team this season because, simply they got LeBron James, who still averaged 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists last year, despite it being his 8 millionth season in the NBA. And they still have the idea, the concept of Anthony Davis and all that he could be. And that duo did win them a championship in 2020, which feels like a decade ago, but apparently was not. And some of the other pieces could be good, like maybe. Okay, so they have LeBron and AD, so why aren't they title contenders, you're asking? Well, strap in, this could take a while. So I'm going to start with the obvious. I wake up every single morning and check to see if Russell Westbrook has been traded yet. When he inevitably has not, I burst into tears. This is a guy who has been a great player in this league, a guy who could be a good player in this league still. Instead, he stubbornly refuses to acknowledge any of his shortcomings. He cannot shoot. He has never been even an average three-point shooter outside of one outlier season, but he's been absolutely awful the past 5 seasons from 3, yet he still continues to shoot. And he used to be elite at finishing at the rim, but as just a bit of his athleticism has gone away, each of his drives to the basket has become its own special, terrifying adventure. And he's still more than athletic enough to be a good defender, but he is what he's always been, a ball watcher extraordinaire trying to hunt for steals and rebounds while the person he's supposed to be guarding ends up with wide open shot after wide open shot. And on top of all that, he racks up turnovers like he thinks they count towards triple doubles. He shoots, dribbles, and passes as though both of his hands are asleep, and he picks the absolute worst times to display this affliction. He is the most frustrating player I've ever had to pull for, and he is stubbornly defiant about his decline. The Lakers will not win a championship with Russell Westbrook on the team. His negatives far outweigh his positives at this point, and trading for him was one of the biggest mistakes ever, and I'll never forgive him for it. And then you've got Anthony Davis. He's basically Pau Gasol 2.0. He's a great defender, 3-point range on his jumper. He can make some plays here and there, and he's also incredibly soft. Luckily for Pau, he had Kobe to scowl at him to toughen him up. AD does not. You cannot have your big man rolling around grimacing 3 times a game only for it to turn out nothing's wrong. And then the 4th time he does it, there is something wrong. I swear to God, I read a tweet about AD playing with a chip on his shoulder this season, and I thought it was an injury report. He was talking to a reporter about being so excited about this season that thinking about it gave him goosebumps, and I got worried about how long he'd be out with goosebumps. AD was brought in to be the guy as LeBron took a backseat and finished out his career winning rings and making movies. And AD was fantastic during that championship run, but that's looking more and more like it was Mickey Mouse magic than real life. And then you've got the rest of this discount bin-ass roster. You do not put a team like this together on purpose. This is the island of misfit toys of rosters. Outside of LeBron and maybe AD, depending on the day, you have a bunch of guys who have either never accomplished anything, are past their prime, or some combination of both. And in terms of playing style, none of them even fit with LeBron. So LeBron gets a lot of credit for making guys better, and as great as he is, that's not entirely true. He makes a very specific type of player better, a guy who's a catch-and-shoot specialist like a Jason Capono or a Mike Miller. And the only guy here who might fit that bill is Austin Reeves. And even if LeBron helps Austin Reeves reach his full potential, this is still a bad team. And LeBron seems either less interested or less able to pull off a carry job like he has in the past. Feels like he's just trying to stay healthy enough to break the career scoring mark and play with his son. And what's really scary is rebuilding after the LeBron era is going to get ugly. But let's just focus on this season for now. If everything breaks right, this is still not a championship team. They will make the playoffs though, but that 45.5 win over under feels a bit high to me. They've gone from a team that won a ring being defense first to a team that really doesn't defend or score. I'm hoping they fix that this year for obvious reasons. Should be fun though. And now they're making me pull for Patrick Beverley, so that's another thing I have to talk to a therapist about. So let's just enjoy LeBron's individual accomplishments and keep it moving. All right, so now let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks, who were 52-30 last year. They made an incredible run to the Western Conference Finals after embarrassing the Phoenix Suns. They lost to the Golden State Warriors there. So why are they a playoff team this year? Okay, so the reason for that playoff run was basically Luka Doncic. You can basically pencil him in at 29-9-9 every year now. And with Luka, they're only going to be so bad. They're basically guaranteed a playoff spot as long as he's playing for them and healthy. They're also getting Tim Hardaway Jr. back from injury, and Spencer Dinwiddie is going to get a full season with them after coming over from the Wizards in the middle of last year. And they also brought in head case Christian Wood, who can be an 18-10 guy when his mind's right. This could be the best supporting cast Luka's ever had. Okay, so why are they here instead of competing for a championship? Well, if their playing style won't change, none of it matters. I mean, while Luka basically guarantees you a playoff spot, he also guarantees you won't be an actual threat to win the NBA championship with how he plays now. They lost point guard Jalen Brunson to the Knicks, but they look better at times with him running the show simply because the other guys were able to get in a rhythm and contribute more. And Luka's also a conditioning question mark, which is due almost as much to his extreme usage rate on offense as it is to the fact that he doesn't look like a guy who's going to choose grilled chicken or just go for a run. He's indifferent on defense as well, and teams hunt him, which only tires him out more. Now, he does always have the energy to complain to the refs, which also leads to buckets for the other team. So his flaws are really as obvious as his skills. And I did say this could be Luka's best supporting cast, but that's not saying a whole lot. The scoring threats on this team are incredibly streaky. Some of that's due to how Luka plays, but some of that is just who they are. And I already talked about Christian Wood a little bit. He's a guy who could win Sixth Man of the Year, or he could be suspended for trying to fight a coach. So overall, big picture, a roster full of streaky guys is going to make for a streaky team. I don't think that playing for Slovenia in the Euros is going to have the same effect on Luka as I predicted for Jokic, because he's shown a next level ability to get out of shape fast. So while they won't be competing for a championship, I do think they win a series or two in the playoffs just based off of Luka's ability as a floor raiser. Jason Kidd really has him on the right track. I do think they take a step back in the regular season, but they come in over the 48.5 wins that Vegas is predicting for them. All right, moving on to the Atlanta Hawks. They had a little bit of a disappointing year last year, 43-39 in the regular season, and they lost relatively easily to the Miami Heat in the first round. This is a team that can score, but they struggle to defend just like their star Trae Young. However, I think they are still a playoff team, so why? Okay, so let me start off by saying that I went to a Hawks game last year and had so much fun. And like I said, I'm a sad Lakers fan, but I like to be able to pull for the Hawks since they're so close and I had so much fun there. But Trae Young makes it very hard. He feels a lot like if Russell Westbrook went to Gary Payton's school for trash talk. But he is an incredible talent who has made everyone who called him a bust after he was traded for Luka on draft night look silly. He's going to give you 25 to 30 points and 8 to 10 assists a night, and he's going to do his ridiculous ice tray celebration all the time. Now, speaking of unlikable but talented guards, DeJounte Murray comes over from the Spurs. He's an under-the-radar triple-double threat who put up a ridiculous 21, 8, and 9 stat line. He also led the league with 2 steals per game. As for the unlikable part, he spent his summer playing in pro-ams and for some reason trying to fight all the other players, even though most of them probably just work at an Amazon warehouse. It was a really strange heel turn, but he's incredibly talented, and he should take some of the playmaking burden off of Trae and help cover for his defensive issues as well. They're also pretty solid everywhere else. Their big men are going to rebound, defend, and score on a bunch of lobs, Bogdan Bogdanovic has a wild name, but he's also an absolute killer who seems to specialize in back-breaking threes. And I'm big enough to admit that I can't quite get John Collins's weird tribute to the Wright brothers in the dunk contest out of my head and probably underrate him because of it. Okay, so why aren't they title contenders? Well, Trae is just as likely to go nuclear as he is to be taken out of the game with physical play and being hunted when he's on defense. He had an impressive playoff debut in 2021, but last year the Heat bullied him into 15-5-6 on 32% shooting and a disgusting 18% from three. When your best player can be neutralized like that, you have a very definite ceiling, and I'm also going to need to be convinced that pairing him with Murray can be effective for both. Then you have the whole issue where John Collins and Trae don't seem to be on the same page all the time. These are some pretty significant obstacles to being anything other than a really annoying team in the East. Okay, so what does this mean for this season? Well, Vegas is thinking they're going to be a little bit better this year and set the over-under at 45.5 wins, and I agree. Despite not liking their personalities, I think this is going to be a fun team to watch. I think Murray's biggest value comes on the defensive end, and they get up to that 47 win mark. I also wouldn't be shocked to see them make the Eastern Conference Finals, but that is their absolute ceiling. All right, moving on to the Chicago Bulls. They had a surprisingly really good year last year. They went 46-36 before losing in the first round to the Bucks. They were led by DeMar DeRozan's career year where he went 28-5-5. It was one of those seasons where if he were a baseball player, we'd be like, okay, something's up. But he just needed a change of scenery, and he also had the best three-point shooting year of his career, which really helped that scoring average. Okay, so why are they going to be competing for a playoff spot again this year? Well, DeRozan teams with Zach LaVine to form one of the best wing combos in the league. Now, LaVine took a step back from his incredible 2020-2021 season, but he still averaged 25-5-5. And they are one of the best combos in terms of athleticism and shooting ability, particularly LaVine, who's still pretty young. And they still have big man Nikola Vucevic, who's still getting it done. He's this generation's Ronnie Cycli or Jack Sikma, if you want to go back even further. Just a highly skilled big dude who has quietly put up numbers under the radar. He had a down year last year shooting it from three, but he still put up 17 and 11. However, they weren't able to make it into the title contender realm of things because they have some pretty glaring weaknesses, such as Lonzo Ball, who has steadily improved since coming into the league as a super hyped big baller brand spokesman, and he was shooting lights out last year, even with that weird form, but then he got hurt. And unfortunately, he's still not healed, and they don't really seem to know when he'll be cleared to play again. So they're going to miss his playmaking skills and solid perimeter defense, in addition to that much improved shooting. Now, a big reason why that Lonzo injury hurts is that they don't have a ton of depth. They signed Goran Dragic to help, but he's as healthy as he is young, which is to say not very. And they also signed Andre Drummond to help out in the paint. And in the preseason, he was knocking down threes, which has to make you sick if you pull for a team that has Russell Westbrook like I do, or Ben Simmons or Draymond. But he's still Andre Drummond, so I wouldn't be counting on a ton of anything from him except for shoulder hair. Speaking of hair, Alex Caruso is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, but he has as much offense as he does hair. Kobe White and Patrick Williams are also good and have shown flashes of potential, but nothing consistent yet. Overall, what to expect, this is really a bubble playoff contender for me. They need Kobe White or Patrick Williams, who I just talked about, to be healthy and fulfill some of that potential if they want to come close to matching last year's 46 wins and making the playoffs again. As far as matching last season's win total, Vegas doesn't think that's going to happen. They've set the over-under at 41.5 wins. I'm inclined to agree. DeRozan's still going to be good, but I find it hard to believe he's going to be that good again. Also, LaVine and Vucevic are going to do what they always do, but that's rarely translated to wins. I'd even go under the 41.5 wins, put them in the high 30s, maybe 40 win category. Too much has to go right, and the potential for things going very wrong is too high. I do think in the East, they will be able to compete for a playoff spot, though. Okay, next up, we've got the Toronto Raptors, Drake's favorite team. They had a pretty strong season last year, 48-34, made the playoffs, lost to the 76ers in the first round. Why do I think they're making it back to the playoffs this year? Well, first of all, this is one of the best run organizations in the league. Masai Ujiri knows how to put a team together, and Nick Nurse knows how to coach them. Then they have last year's Rookie of the Year, Scotty Barnes, who can almost do it all. He was immediately a big contributor to a playoff team, which is very rare for a rookie. If he can continue to develop on offense, this team is going to be a problem. And he's in an organization known for developing talent, as I said before. No better example of that than Fred VanVleet, who went from undrafted in 2016 to making the All-Star game last year after averaging 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists. He reminds me of a smaller Chauncey Billups. Or late first-round pick in the 2016 draft, Pascal Siakam, whose three-point shot came back last year, and he averaged 23 points, 8.5 rebounds, and a career-high 5 assists. Or the other late first-round pick, this time from the 2017 draft, OG Anunoby, who has increased his scoring average each year all the way up to 17 points per game last year. He's one of the more solid wings in the league when he's healthy. I think you get the picture, and I didn't even mention Gary Trent Jr., who averaged 18 points a game last year. This is a team full of versatile wings who can score and defend, and that's a huge piece of what you need to win in today's game. Okay, so even though they have such a big part of the game covered, they're still not title contenders. Why is that? Well, the main reason is they're a very streaky three-point shooting team, which is the other thing you need if you want to win today. Particularly their number one option on offense, Spicy P, who is more of a slasher mid-range guy, and he's had multiple long stretches in his career where he just can't hit threes. It's hard for me to trust a team whose number one scorer is that streaky, even with so many other pieces who could theoretically pick up the slack. And Barnes is a guy who you would hope would develop into your number one option on offense, particularly since Siakam really would be better suited as a number two guy, but Barnes has never been particularly aggressive when looking to score, even when he was at Florida State. Now, this might change if he develops confidence in his shooting, but nothing I've seen inspires a great deal of hope in him ever developing a consistent jump shot. Okay, so what does this mean for the whole season? Well, I made the Fred VanVleet, Chauncey Billups comp earlier, but this whole team really reminds me of Chauncey's Pistons, with Siakam being like a Rip Hamilton who dribbles a little bit more, and Barnes being like a Tayshaun Prince 2.0. So this team might compete for a title in the mid-2000s, but the way the game has changed and their lack of shooting and offense in general really would prevent them from doing that today. They're going to be good, though, and Vegas has set their over-under at 45.5 wins. I think they come in just above that at like 47 wins, and they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs. And moving forward, I wouldn't be shocked to see them acquire a piece who could take them over the hump. All right, let's go to the city of beignets and talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, who were 36-46 last year, but they did make the playoffs where they lost in the first round to the Suns, where they gave them a tough 6 games. Why do I think they're going to be back in the playoffs this year? I mean, look, we can talk about how talented Brandon Ingram is, or how incredible CJ McCollum looked after he came over from Portland, or the revelation that rookie Herb Jones was on defense, or how Coach Willie Green looks like a superstar coach in the making, or any number of other things. They have a number of great pieces, many of them young, and they showed a ton of heart by not only getting into the playoffs, but by taking the number 1 seed Suns to 6 games. So yes, they'll win, but they could win very big because Zion is back. And look, we know what he can do when he's healthy after seeing him put up 27-7 in his second year in the league. But after seeing him in preseason, the rest of the league should be worried because this dude looks like he's in incredible shape. I mean, look, he's never going to look shredded. He's just a naturally stocky dude, but he does look more cut than he's ever looked. And that's a great sign, if for no other reason than less weight means less pressure on his lower body where he's had all those injuries. I was already pretty excited about what a full season of this team would be without a healthy Zion. So you throw him in the mix and the Pelicans can make some real noise this year. But not quite title contending noise. And let's start with the obvious. Zion looks great, but you're always going to hold your breath with him health-wise. And even with him, this team has several scorers, but nobody I'd really trust to lead them deep in the playoffs. I mean, McCollum's never done it as the lead guy. Ingram is obviously a great scorer, but it still feels like his ceiling is as a number 2 guy on a title contender. Even a healthy Zion has some holes in his offensive game that's really going to make it tough for him come playoff time. When you're seeing the same team for 5 or 6 games in a row and they can game plan for you, I mean, at least unless he's added something wild like a 3-point shot since the last time we saw him. For them to be a true title contender, he'd have to be Giannis level, getting buckets in the paint, and the only person I've seen be Giannis level in today's NBA is Giannis. They're lacking a true superstar, not just in highlights, but in actual production. But I mean, big picture, they built a hell of a foundation, and I expect them to improve on that 36 win mark from last season. Vegas does too. They've set their over-under at 44.5 wins. But this is where things get a little bit tricky. Zion's the obvious X factor here, and without him, I think they're just in the low 40s in wins. Zion takes him to the 50 win mark if he's healthy and ready to play. However, no rings until one of their young guys, again, looking at you, Zion, develops into someone who can carry the load in the playoffs. Next up, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who had a great year last year, really fun season. They went 46-36. They celebrated making the playoffs by celebrating like they had just cured cancer, which is funny because we will chastise pro athletes if we think they don't care enough, and also clown them if we feel like they care too much. But anyways, they lost in the first round in a tough series to Memphis, and it included a couple of poorly thought out chicken protests. Last season was a success. Why do I think there will be more of the same? Well, a big reason is Anthony Edwards looks like he's headed towards becoming a superstar. Now, the only hiccup in that was a oddly homophobic Instagram post. Don't know what that was about. It really bummed me out, though, because off the court, he's one of the league's most fun interviews, and he had a great role in Adam Sandler's Netflix movie Hustle. And then on the court, he looks very much like this generation's human highlight film. He averaged 21, 5, and 4. He improved his three-point shooting. He looks like the number one option for this T-Wolves offense to me. I'm interested to see if he continues to mature on and also off the court, most importantly, since they're only going to go as far as he takes them. And then they have Karl Anthony Towns, who reminds me of another former Kentucky big man who I'm super familiar with, Anthony Davis. On offense, at least, he's an incredibly talented player who can give you 25 and 10 every night. He gets the majority of his points from beyond the arc without Brandon Silvers, where he shoots like 40%. He's been their number one guy, but he's better as a great second option to me. But I mean, he's a great piece to have. And the big move for them this offseason was trading for everyone's favorite patient zero, Rudy Gobert. Rudy has never seemed super well liked in the league, even before he shut down the entire sports injury. Maybe it's the French accent. But he is an incredible defensive player, having been named Defensive Player of the Year 3 times in his career. He should help cover for a lot of the issues that Cat has on defense and maybe scare off some of the guys who blow past D'Angelo Russell as well. And he's not a guy who necessarily, okay, I think I got it, requires a lot of touches on offense, which is good because this team has a lot of guys who do. However, they are not a true title contender, so why? Well, let's stick with Rudy here to start. He doesn't require a lot of touches on offense because he's terrible on offense. You're basically playing 4-on-5 on offense when he's in the game, outside of some offensive rebounding putbacks that he gets. And then as great as he is on defense, he's been played off the court on that end of the court almost every year in the playoffs. He's most effective around the rim, so if you make him guard someone who draws him away from the basket, he's completely useless. Combine that uselessness with his offensive skill, you might as well just stick a big chair out there. And I mentioned that Karl Anthony Towns is a lot like Anthony Davis in terms of size and offensive talent. Unfortunately, he's also soft like him with roughly zero of the defensive talent, to the point that public perception really shifted on him as the T-Wolves started getting more and more nationally televised games. He's a guy who has a naturally higher pitched voice to go along with his soft game, and then he bizarrely tried to make it deeper in post-game interviews, which reminded me of when Drake starts rapping about shooting somebody, and then in the playoffs, he would straight up look terrified at times, but other times he did look okay. So I think the cause of that issue in particular is he was quite clearly playing off emotions. And the thing about emotions is that they come and go. So if that's what's fueling your game, then your game's going to come and go as well. So he just needs to be himself on and off the court because he just isn't good when he starts playing like whatever character that was. This team really needs a strong veteran presence to guide the younger guys. Their vets right now are Austin Rivers, who I don't think anybody is turning to for guidance, Kyle Anderson, who is perpetually drowsy, and D'Angelo Russell, who is completely unserious. Cat seems to have a good head on his shoulders, but a solid vet would really help with the issues I was just talking about. More importantly, Anthony Edwards should be their best player, but even before this summer's homophobia, he was already a guy teetering on the edge of being unserious and in need of someone to help make sure he doesn't fall over the edge and turn into Nick Young. You really don't want that from your franchise player, especially when D'Angelo Russell is on the team. So at the end of the day, this is a team with some very obvious talent and some very obvious flaws. And with the majority of their flaws being either on defense or mentally, they just aren't serious championship contenders. However, they are going to be fun to watch and they should win a lot of games. Vegas has set the over-under at 48.5 wins. That feels a little bit high. I think they match last year's total with 46 wins again and make the playoffs. And the final playoff contender for the 2022-2023 NBA season, according to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs went 44-38 last year. They lost in the play-in, but they got a bright future, and I think they're going to make the playoffs this year. Let's talk about why. Okay, well, first of all, this is a very solid defensive team. They have a good mix of skill sets as well as great young talent and some solid vets. And then this past offseason, they added one of the league's most prolific scorers in Donovan Mitchell, who averaged 26 points per game for the Jazz last year. Then you have young big man Evan Mobley, who made a strong case for Rookie of the Year last year. He averaged 15 points, 9 boards, and 2 blocks a game. You know he's going to defend well, and you'd have to think that he'll eventually develop a little bit more of an offensive game, which is exactly like the progression we saw in another lanky, defensive-minded young big, Jarrett Allen, who just so happens to be on this team as well. He was also selected to the All-Star team for the first time last year, and he put up 16 and 11 on nearly 68% shooting from the field, which is absurd. And they also have some great veteran depth in the form of the dreamy Ricky Rubio, Kevin Love, who was healthy for the first time in years, Karis LeVert, and the scary when mad Robin Lopez. Okay, so they have a lot to be excited about, but they're not quite a title contender for starters because they have a young team, and young teams have a tough time winning even when they have regular season success. We saw that last year with the Memphis Grizzlies. The Cavs didn't make it to the actual playoffs, and a lot of that was due to untimely injuries, and everyone I've ever heard speak about playing in the playoffs, they talk about how it's just a different level of intensity and how you have to experience that and get a feel for it. And while they did bring in one of the league's top scorers who does have some playoff experience where he's had some monster performances, I'm not super high on Donovan Mitchell, especially compared to everybody else. He's definitely an upgrade over Colin Sexton, but he has some flaws. He can be a playmaker, but he looks for his own shot first, second, and third, sometimes fourth, and he can be incredibly streaky. Now, he had the freedom in Utah to try to shoot himself out of slumps, but he shouldn't be allowed to do that here. He's never really had to share the load offensively with anybody his entire career, and Darius Garland is just too good not to run the show, and the Cavs as a whole have too many options not to spread the wealth. So I'm a little bit worried about Donovan's ability to fit in and what his presence means for Darius's development. Also, Donovan has some major deficiencies on defense. So the question for me really is, will the Cavs team defense suffer because of him, or are they good enough to actually cover up for his weaknesses? All right, this is going to be a scorching hot take, so please prepare yourselves. Okay, so I actually think that Donovan is an incredible player who is best suited to be a sixth man, particularly on this team. It'd be kind of like, this is a very old reference, but kind of like a Ricky Pierce type, where he just comes in, he guns away in short bursts. He's still getting like 30 minutes a game and 15 to 18 shots, but he's not the focal point of the offense. I hope I didn't burn your eyebrows off with that take. Now, I don't know many Cavs fans, but the ones who do exist, if they do exist, should be super excited for this team. I made a Memphis comp earlier, and they really remind me of last year's Grizzlies squad, except I like the Cavs pieces even more. Vegas has set their over-under at 47.5 wins, but I think that's a little low, particularly if I'm off on my Donovan Mitchell take, and a lot of the things that I don't like about his game were the result of him having to carry too much of the load in Utah. I'm also excited to see how Evan Mobley improves, and I wouldn't be shocked to see Darius Garland make a Ja Morant-type jump, although I doubt you see it in his numbers just due to how loaded they are. But this team has an incredibly bright future, and they're just not quite a title contender yet, but just wait a couple more years when LeBron and Bronny show up. All right, thanks for checking out the first two parts. Part 3 is coming out tomorrow. We're going over the worst teams in the league. See y'all tomorrow.